What did you do to reignite your relationship with your partner, but instead ruined it? She took me to Disney World for my birthday. I was very surprised seeing how we were just college kids who could barely afford anything. Turns out she begged her best friends, who hated me, rich parents, to pay for the trip. And they agreed, as long as the friend came with. So there I was on my birthday trip with my girlfriend and her male BFF who hates my guts. I'm a woman, by the way. So this dude was just madly in love with my girlfriend who friend-zoned the hell out of him. But I'm a good sport, and it's Disney. So I took the opportunity to have a great time in spite of getting glared at every 5 seconds. However, the final straw wasn't the guy who paid for the trip but hated me. It was my girlfriend having a full-on toddler temper tantrum because we missed the parade she wanted to see. I'm talking literally screaming and kicking on the ground in a crowded plaza. And then her BFF caving to her tantrum, calling his parents and having them pay for a whole nother day for all 3 of us just so she could see the parade. Yeah, I was done after that. Last I heard, they got married years later after she divorced her first wife. All those red flags that were scattered around Disney World that day. Seriously, that's wild. Story 2. Bought a house. We were separated and she was very back and forth on fixing her marriage, and I had been checked out for about a year when we spent some time together and, I thought, reconnected. Shortly after, we got the chance at some property for really cheap through a friend of hers. And since a lot of her resentment towards me was based on me losing my job, and thus the first house we bought together, we thought it would be a chance to reignite. Especially since it had a mother-in-law apartment so we could have separate spaces and slowly work on rebuilding our marriage. Instead, we fought like crazy. She ended up going all in the divorce and getting a boyfriend, even though things still aren't official with the state, and now we'll live in a trailer on the property so that we don't end each other while we sort crap out. It's awful. Story 3. I arranged a dinner with her family. Holy crap, did they do an amazing job ruining the relationship. The first thing her sister said to me was how she didn't like people from the region I was born in, then proceeded to correct herself by saying, "Actually, it's just the men from there are stupid. Women in general are wonderful creatures." Later on, after acknowledging that me and her sister were going through a rough patch, she added how happy she was that she wasn't in a relationship. Her brother chose to never reply to me directly. Instead, he did so by sharing his thoughts with his sister as if I wasn't there. Moreover, he wouldn't do anything about the recently rescued dog he brought with him without asking. He was constantly gnawing at random belongings of mine. Story 4. I had an LDR in my early 20s. We'd been together almost a year, and he would always come to my place when we met up. After almost a year, I decided it was time to go to his place and meet his family. He still lived at home because he was in school. His parents were very nice, but I could tell his mom was a little pushy. Over the next week I was there, I witnessed how much of a child or mama's boy he actually was. His mom left him post-it notes around the entire house, reminding him to do things. Don't forget to wash your dishes, etc. I thought it was just her being pushy, but when I saw a note in the bathroom that said, "Don't forget to clean thoroughly," I cringed at the note. And when I asked him about it, he shrugged and said, "She reminds me of everything I need to do." The next day, his mom decided it was a good time to give me the rundown on how to leave the notes and other instructions so he'll remember to take care of himself. I broke up with him before I stepped foot in the airplane back home. You're 22 years old and your mom is to remind you to bathe yourself? I'm a partner, not his mom. Story 5. This is what my partner did, but I'm sure he wanted it to revive us. He proposed. It ended the relationship within a month. Not because he proposed, but because he did it during an absolute crisis in our relationship. On a ski vacation where he barely said 2 words to me for 4 days until the proposal. He also had no ring and said if I said yes, then we would go shopping for one. I felt so awful. But my gut reaction was so strongly negative that I just felt like I couldn't possibly say yes and that our relationship was definitely over. It would have been so much better to have a really deep, open conversation about what was going on with us. Story 6. We both wrote about 3 things we wanted to change and to bring our relationship back to life. There were things about me that I hadn't done in over a year. In question, she got really defensive and insisted I still do it, then talked about a situation that happened a year prior to prove her point. The main one was asking for one date night a month. When I told her mine, I basically had to fight tooth and nail to just get her to consider it. We never had any dates. Rarely ever saw each other, and I was asking for 2 hours of her time once a month. After that conversation, I really had to reflect on whether this is what I wanted or not. I was kind of glad when we broke up a couple of weeks later. Story 7. It didn't ruin it, but my wife had told me about a fantasy she has of walking in on me watching, and then joining in with me. One night I openly had my phone watching in bed when she came in, like not hiding it, volume up, etc. She got really angry at me and jealous of the women I was attracted to in the videos. No action happened that night, and I'll probably never try that again. I guess I should have let her know I was going to be doing that, but I figured the spontaneity was part of the fantasy. Story 8. Asked him to get therapy for his trauma and long history of mental health issues. I dealt with mine and come a long way, but it got to the point that I felt like I was moving forward and he wasn't. I asked him if he'd be willing to try therapy, since it was impacting our relationship. I gave him a year to work on his mental health. He didn't. You can't force someone to get help. But I felt after 5 years together, I at least owed it to us to ask, instead of just leaving when things got hard. After I broke up with him after over a year of telling him how things were impacting us and me, he broke down. It's truly heartbreaking that he wasn't ready to get help. Based on how the breakup went, I'm not sure he ever will. But I gave it my all. Story 9. First wife and I were really on the rocks. Hadn't had intimacy in months, didn't communicate anymore, just no love left. She rented an Airbnb in a snowy mountain resort with the idea of rekindling things. It was nice, but the Airbnb kept having disasters. The kitchen sink got clogged, the TV didn't work, the fireplace couldn't be used, etc. Seems like minor stuff, but it all just added to the stress of trying to rekindle the relationship. Ended up getting divorced a short time later. Story 10. I had a falling out with a close friend. It was mostly because of this girl he started dating that I genuinely thought he was a terrible human being, and only there to take advantage of his stable income. Being quite incapable herself, I figured it was bad enough for him to deserve a conversation, and it didn't go well. We went a few years without speaking to each other, and one day, I saw a post online that suggests he's getting married soon. I notice it's not the terrible human girl, and reach out to him to congratulate him. He's happy I did. We talk like it hasn't been 5 years. I'm excited for him, and we're making plans. He shares pictures of the engagement and whatnot, and I exclaim, "Thank God it's not her. I really thought you'd marry her." Turns out it is her. She just gained weight and changed her hair. It is her. Is the last thing he said, and I was blocked shortly after. Story 11. This was about 30 years ago when I was still in high school. She was an aspiring writer, but was using this real piece of crap word processor from the late 80s. She constantly complained about how cruddy it was, how much she hated it, couldn't even hook it up to the family printer, etc. Well, a couple of years earlier, I had purchased a standalone word processor that, while it was a couple of years old, it was generations better than the oversized calculator she was using. It had been sitting up in the attic since I bought my PC. So I dusted off the box and tossed it in the trunk of my car and took it to school with me the last day before the winter break. She and her friends were pestering me about what I was getting her for Christmas all day, but I didn't spill the beans. When classes let out for the day, I had some stuff to take care of, but gave her my key so she could go get it. What happened next is what was relayed to me by her friends, because I wasn't there for it. Apparently everyone ran out into the parking lot. She opened the trunk, screamed, "God damn it!" and immediately slammed it shut. She then stormed back into the school, tracked me down, and broke up with me on the spot. As it turned out, she'd already known what I was giving her. Apparently I couldn't trust my best friend at the time to keep his big mouth shut, and she thought I'd bought it specifically for her, and she didn't like me spending much money on her. She said it made her feel like a street worker. I hadn't, but there was no convincing her otherwise. I'm still crazy about her, but we never got back together. I talked on and off for a few years afterward, but she ghosted me out of nowhere about 20 years ago. We don't have any current mutual friends, so I never found out why. But I wasn't about to pursue it further. I look her up from time to time to make sure she's still alive, but other than that, I honor her apparent wishes and stay away from her. Still hurts like hell to think about, though. And for the people telling me to move on, I have. You don't get to choose who you love or why, and by that same token, you don't get to decide you don't love someone anymore. This isn't someone I pine over. This isn't someone I fantasize over. This isn't someone who has affected my life in any way in almost 3 decades. This is simply someone I used to spend time with, that I cared a great deal for and probably always will. So please, stop dishing out the armchair psychiatry. For the record, I had multiple relationships in the 10 years she and I remained close friends, one of which resulted in my first marriage and my first child. Since she ghosted me, I've had 3 other relationships, one of which resulted in my second child, including my current marriage. That relationship started 17 years ago when we just had our 8th wedding anniversary yesterday. Me caring for her even after all this time has in no way impacted anything in my life, nor would her return if she decided to pop back up. At best, she'd be held at arm's length, and I'd probably view her intentions with suspicion. My spouse would also be privy to all of our conversations. They've got my email and phone passwords anyway, and I'd never meet her face to face by myself. Something tells me she didn't live up to her aspirations. Story 12. I got a job at the same office as her. She asked me to apply, and I wanted to be able to see her every day. When we had our blowout fight, she said that she started to resent me because I didn't have to work as hard as her to do well. I started to resent her because she never wanted to hang out anymore. I left the job after 4 months. Then talked to her again for 7 months. We hooked up one last time, and that was that. From office romance to office rivalry, and back to office hookup. Story 13. Allowing my then husband and then best friend to convince me to become poly with him, it haunts me to this day that I told my ex, this goes one of 3 ways. I lose you, I lose her, or I lose both of you. But they told me I was paranoid and was excluding the possibility that it would work. I also made the rule that if one of us was uncomfortable or not into it, we'd stop. He agreed. He did not stop. I was also very obviously not poly-minded. I knew them both. She has a lot of broken parts that make her emotionally hoard people. She has like 7 other partners. My ex is emotionally unstable. I would never be able to do 2 relationships, especially when ours was already failing. I knew enough about myself. It was never going to end well. I left him a year after when it was obvious he wasn't ever going to choose me. That they both were essentially gaslighting and mistreating me to get to one another. I'd asked them to end the relationship 10 months earlier. They lied and said it was done. It was not. I found out years later in my ex's face when he let it slip about their anniversary. It's the day he told me he'd broken up with her. Anyway, don't do poly and don't let your husband be with your best friend. Story 14. He wanted to open our marriage. Encouraged by his polyamorous therapist, which was the tip of a crappy iceberg. After much back and forth, I apprehensively agreed, and I was in a spiteful, screw around and find out frame of mind. The marriage came crumbling down when I not only could score my own pursuit, but his as well, meaning it was my fault we failed. The funny part, in hindsight, is I only flirted, whereas he aimed to go further and he framed it as though I cheated. It's given me a vehement hatred for open relationships. There is no question after that experience that I am a staunch monogamist. Story 15. Moved in from Philly to Hawaii and gave him everything we ever dreamed of. We got married, made a home together. We both worked. Dates, romance, celebrating each other, and a baby girl on the way. He was a veteran with undiagnosed PTSD and thought he was on the road to healing. After 2 years of the same VA doctor, he got a new one who prescribed him muscle relaxers. He took the entire bottle and chased it down. Passed away exactly 700 days of marriage and left behind his unborn child. He was my childhood sweetheart. I tried to love his pain away. Didn't work. Story 16. Not me, but I had a pair of friends who got married when they were 19 to 20. 24 years later, they decided to open their marriage and show the wild oats they never got the chance to. This involved them both dating other women, but no other men for her. About a year into it, he meets a woman, falls in love with her, and she ends up moving into their home as their girlfriend. 3 years on from that, they're divorced now. I noticed I said I had a pair of friends. Their marriage was far from the only relationship that got ruined in this crap show. Before I read this thread, I was worried I was putting in too many specifics, but now I've remembered how incredibly common and almost boilerplate this kind of thing is. Opening your relationship doesn't work, kids. Story 17. Maybe this isn't the right answer, but here goes. We were having serious problems in our relationship. I decided I can't change him, but I could change me, so I tried to be the perfect wife. I read several books and did everything they said, even when I thought it was stupid. I didn't get angry about anything. I did everything myself, so I didn't have to ask for anything. I took care of everything. For 3 years. All it did was make things so much worse. It's like he needs me to be angry with him at all times, so he intentionally does dumb crap he absolutely knows I hate, or other malicious things so that I'm angry and he's the poor victim who tries his best and falls short of my unreasonable expectations. He ramped it all up during the perfect wife phase. What could have previously been explained by ignorance or incompetence or selfishness now can only be explained by intentional malice aforethought. Our relationship is ruined. It can never be fixed. Story 18. My girlfriend first attempted to break up with me because she relied on me too much for her happiness. We lived an hour and a half apart. Then she realized she didn't want to and asked for me back a couple of times. I gave her 2 weeks with no contact to find a therapist and to write down the pain points in our relationship, and I did the same. We both thought it was a great idea. The day before the 2 weeks were up, I texted her, "I've missed you and I'm excited to see you." She asked to meet that day and dumped me, saying she needed to work on herself and that I was the best boyfriend she'd ever had. I think the 2 weeks ruined it. While she was going to therapy for the first time, it was a volatile period in her life, and she probably needed me there to talk through it. She said everyone in her family loved me and that her mom would probably choose for me to stay in her life if she could. It caught me totally off guard. I asked her to meet up to talk and get some clarity. She said she couldn't because a family member had passed away and she needed to cope and was sorry. I've thought about it every day for the last 2+ months and wonder if I will ever hear back from her. Story 19. We had broken up in 2018. She and I started messaging each other during 2020 and lived on opposite sides of the country. She decides she wants to book a train ticket to come see me and work on things. We agreed to live separately. 2 weeks into her stay, she decided it's not safe to live where she was renting, so she asked me to stay at my place, and I had a full-on anxiety response in my body, but I allowed her to move in anyway. My therapist thought it was a pretty bad idea, but I didn't believe him. Anyway, things were great for 2 weeks, and we had intimacy like rabbits. Then the old ghosts of her past started showing themselves. A month into her staying with me, I had a meltdown and told her I wanted to go back home and buy her a train ticket. She went into a rage and said no. We proceeded to yell at each other for 2 hours and she broke a bunch of stuff in my house. I still allowed her to stay for another 2 months as we tried to repair things emotionally, before she finally agreed to go back home. I still bought her a train ticket and gave her money to help her pay rent. Hands down the dumbest thing I've ever done to try and save a relationship. Thank God for therapy, because that relationship messed me up. Story 20. Met with him while I was on a holiday leave for the army, even though I said no second chances. He kept inviting me over and I went, and then he'd just keep me there and fall asleep but would get angry when I tried to go back home. Couldn't get a single conversation out of him regarding what was next for us. I realized he didn't care as much as I did and that we were in very different places. It didn't last too much longer after that. We were together for nearly 8 years and I haven't talked to him in 3 weeks now. I feel like I made the right decision, no matter how painful it was. Story 21. Trip to Mexico. I put my phone up and really focused on every moment of the trip. I had a lovely time being present and connecting with my partner. Get home and get accused of hiding something or her because I didn't post anything on social. Ended 3 months later. I didn't post anything because I left my phone in the room to focus on her. I know it was an excuse and there's more to it or she had already planned to leave, but I thought it was hilarious to be blamed for something when that something was being present instead of on screens. Story 22. Not me, but I'm a couples therapist and I can name 3 I see too often. Having kids, opening up or trying out ethical non-monogamy. Cheating. The only problem having kids ever solves is the problem of wanting kids. Similarly, the only problem multiple relationships ever solves is the desire for multiple relationships. Both of those two can and frequently are very fulfilling things, but neither of them really makes the existing relationship better, beyond potentially making the people in the relationship feel like they're living the life they want to live. Cheating, of course, is an entire crap show. I only mention it because often folks justify it to themselves as something that is helping the relationship in some way. Example, partner has low drive, so I'm getting my needs met without bothering them. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 23. I bought us plane tickets to Prague. The plan was for us to have some intimate bonding time after my work and other parts of Czechia concluded. Prague is one of my favorite cities, and it would have been his first time in Europe. Despite the disintegrating state of our marriage, I was excited for it. He wound up rage quitting the trip after blowing up at me for no reason, and saying things that really couldn't be taken aback, after which he kept trying to get me to invite him back on it. I said to ask me after a particularly stressful event concluded. But he ignored this and kept pestering nevertheless while gaslighting me throughout. I didn't rage quit. I volunteered not to go so you could have some time for self-care. Yeah, right. I'm not an idiot, and have this thing called a memory. On my last night in Prague, I called him over FaceTime to divorce him and kick him out. Hung up when he began fake crying and begging me to accept an alternative arrangement, where we lived as platonic roommates. But I continued to provide for him anyway. No thank you. Story 24. Tried a new church. He was advised by his boss that it would be better for a relationship to be closer to God. The sermon was themed Better Together. It got me thinking that I really didn't think him and I were better together. On the drive home, I initiated a conversation about some boundaries and things I wanted to change. Otherwise, it just wasn't going to work anymore. The sermon apparently had the opposite effect on him, and he felt that God was telling him we should stay together, but kept everything exactly the same. We broke up before we even got home, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Story 25. We were together almost 4 years, and she always wanted to move to another city to be closer to her friend, female. In preparation to move out, she quit her job, and I said, "You can stay at my place however long you want to make this period easier for her." She got depressed, and her friend blocked her everywhere because she wasn't responding. Yeah, she got stuck between decisions. So I was working, and she was sitting home playing games and smoking for like 7 months. I didn't see much change, but still was trying to save this relationship. Paid rent, bought groceries. She was helping a bit, too. So at the start of April, she just found a job, got a driver's license, and I wanted to go shopping. We got in a silly argument, which made me slip and get hammered after that with friends. Came back home and wanted to smoke, which she refused to give. I then just took it. With so many things I've done for her, I took this refusal personally from her and pushed her away. Got back to my friends, blacked out, and found out next morning she moved out. I was blamed for everything in a relationship, and it felt so much guilt. Tried to get her back and still feel like crap because of that. She was hooking up with another guy through Discord through my PC all this time I was working and was already with him only 10 days after breakup. And even when I realized it, she was pretending they were only friends. I guess if someone wants to move away from you, just let them. They'll find the other way if it didn't work the first time. And you won't feel much love from both sides while trying to save it all. Story 26. Got engaged. I was hoping it would be a big event that could push our dull and dragged-on relationship into an exciting and fulfilling territory. Instead, within days, the haunting reality of what being with someone who refuses to make any changes or sacrifice would feel like is permanent. We had been together for 5 years. I left him 2 weeks after our very public engagement. We had to awkwardly live together for like another month. And I had a very stressful job at the time. It was an awful time, and yet I do not regret anything. So grateful to not be in a relationship with someone very bland and unmotivated. However, I do wish I could have figured that out a few years before the dramatic moment. Yes, I paid for my own engagement ring and I still have it. Story 27. I just celebrated my 5th wedding anniversary. Together for 8 years. We struggled with intimacy for a long duration of this relationship, but we were otherwise good. So, among many other things I tried, I suggested maybe therapy. She went for 3 months and decided her drive was back, but she also pushed me away at this time. So while we were emotionally distant, she decided it was me that she didn't want. She said that every time she imagined me, her drive disappeared again. Then reflected on the rest of our relationship and decided it was all bad. Almost a decade of happiness, building a house, a business, and raising a child together was apparently all bad. She asked for a divorce tonight. I'm devastated. We have a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm so scared to not see her every day. I feel like my heart has been ripped out. Been crying all night. She seems completely nonplussed. Not a single tear. She ate a pizza and fell asleep. I can't eat and can't sleep, especially next to her. I'm so hurt and scared and sad. Update, I found out she was already cheating before she gave me the letter that said she wasn't happy, which contained some areas of my life I could and have started to improve, but also outright fabrications. Story 28. Everything. I tried everything with him and for him, to the point where I lost sight of who I was, how I see myself, lost respect for myself, and I lost hope and the urge to keep trying. In the end, it wasn't because of me. It was because he was in love with somebody else, and he always will be. After 5 years, I never got the relationship I wanted from him, but I kept trying. Eventually, I realized it doesn't matter anymore. He'll never love me, because if I don't love myself, there's nothing left to love. We had 1 child at the time, and now we have 2. He still treats me like crap. He still doesn't want to be with me. And we still don't get along. I had a few short months during my pregnancy. I regained hope and was beginning to feel happy. We were starting to be friends. That's something we never had. Friendship. A real, true friendship I always wanted, but we never got it. It was so nice. And something must have happened because overnight he changed his mind. And I don't mean like just kind of worked into this. I mean it's like we had a great day, he went to bed. The next morning he woke up. He went and left on his bike for a minute. I came back and he was a different person. He looked at me differently. I've seen it in his eyes, looking differently. He talked to me differently. I try to talk to him about it. He just tells me, "You just want to talk." It hasn't come back since. My daughter is 9 months old and we still don't sleep together. We don't even share a room. We barely parent together. He doesn't like me. He's miserable because he wants somewhere else and he lets me see this damn near every day. He tells me he loves me once in a while. He's leaving, hanging up the phone. I feel like it's more repetitive or out of habit. It's the second hardest thing I've ever had to deal with. He won't even let us be friends now. And I think what happened is he got scared because he found that in that friendship we were building, we really did love each other. Maybe I wasn't so bad. So yeah, I'm grateful that I have our kids and a roof over our heads because I can't work yet until she's at least a year old. And I just still depend on daycares and how much it costs. Until I can get back to work, can you change your living situation again, like I did before? So before you put all that energy and time in, make sure it's something you both want, not just one of you. One person can't do it all. Story 29. I decided to not cancel a trip to go see him overseas, went on the trip, and was treated like crap. Constantly lonely, never good enough, had to pry him off a game to do much as look at him for longer than 5 minutes. Intimately pushed way too far and then he ran off to another woman because I wasn't satisfying him. With me, in the same house. Then ignored me for the remainder of the night. Bar 1 minute long conversation he refused to properly have. Physically fought with me when I made plans to run in the middle of the night, calling me crazy and unreasonable for wanting to leave. They completely fired the thing we had going on in the foot. I haven't spoken to that schmuck in months, and I couldn't be happier. Story 30. About a decade ago, after my husband cheated on me, he agreed to go to couples counseling to try and save our marriage. However, we couldn't afford anything but the counseling he could get through the VA. He was a veteran in the lightest possible sense. He was Air Force. He never went anywhere near a combat zone. He mostly just got hammered in Germany. But he pushes this whole broken PTSD veteran narrative. I would love now to know what qualifications this counselor had, as he basically just showed up and implied that my ex-husband wasn't responsible for his actions because it was sad and that it was my fault for not being a good enough wife. Literally. It was wild. Seeing that my husband had zero interest in taking accountability for his actions or putting in even one iota of effort, not to mention sitting there and allowing a subpar professional to tag team and gaslighting me, was one of the things that really led to me ending things. I could improve in the ways in which I was a flawed partner, but I realized that he was terminally selfish. There was no fixing that if he didn't want to. Why would he? All of this fit way better with his dumb self-mythologizing anti-hero broken man narrative he desperately clung to. And he was still young and handsome, so there would never be a shortage of women who would believe his lies for a while. Story 31. Like every long relationship, 19 years of marriage, we had our ups and our downs. We always tried our best to make it work because we were very happy. Or at least I was most of the time, and we have raised 4 kids. I ruined our relationship by supporting my wife in every way I could think of through her cancer diagnosis and treatments. I never missed an appointment. I made sure we were making lasting memories of the kids. I researched treatments, and I always made sure that all of her questions were answered by each doctor we saw. I never felt closer to her. Apparently, my mistake was researching prepaid funeral packages. I found out 7 months into her treatments that she had started having an affair after she was diagnosed. After a prolonged period of gaslighting, she said she was tired of the talk about passing away and she wanted to do what she wanted to do. I'll never be the same again. Story 32. We worked together at a resort one summer and started dating. She went back home and so did I, 900 miles apart. We visited over fall and winter breaks. After 2 years of just doing long distance, I decided to move to her town and give it a real shot. She had a year left of college and I had just graduated. Got a job teaching at a crappy school. Moved into an apartment 900 miles from everyone I knew besides people I knew through her. We made it 3 months before she broke up with me. You are much more interesting on the phone. I finished my contract, packed my bags, and moved 1,400 miles away to the first school that would hire me. Story 33. Dated my ex because she called me. I was willing to give it one last try, even though I was done really bad by her earlier. After dating for 3 weeks, it felt the vibe was off. Decided to call her and I got to know that her parents never wanted me in their house again because of stuff she said after we broke up to her parents. What she also said was over-exaggerated and lies, to easier get over me at the time. Realized I can't deal with a person who lies about me. Also got to know that she didn't feel well lately, and that's why she called me in the first place, to get comfort and love, and when she finally felt happy, it was time for me to go. After that, I can't put trust in any girl ever, and will not be able to commit to a girl in a while. Story 34. These are pretty ugly, so I'll pitch in a funny one. We'd been married for 3 years. I proposed we live out this teenage fantasy of sleeping in a seedy motel, sneaking in a wine bottle with some snacks, having intimacy in the hot tub, and even more on the bed with a ceiling mirror. We wanted to pretend we were young. The hot tub was defective. The bed was broken. We forgot to bring a corkscrew. And when we finished having intimacy, the place was way too noisy and uncomfortable to sleep in. He woke me up at around 3 a.m. and begged for us to go home. We had a nice sleep in our own bed and ordered a massive brunch later. We're still together and happy. Story 35. Oh man, this one haunts me. About 5-ish years ago, things were very unspicy between my late wife and I after our kid was born. It's complicated, and I would rather not go deep into the why, but a part of it is that she struggled with body image issues. Our relationship in basically every other way was, really. I talked about it for months at this point, trying to figure out something that would help us ease back into intimacy after a few years of nothing. Start slow, communicate, be careful and calm. Take it really easy and relearn how to do things. So we're going to have a pretty big and stressful life change. So I offer the idea that we start that thing. Just have a nice night with some advanced cuddling. Instead, my wife is in this weird, take me like it's a romance novel, and also, I'm extremely nervous that we're going to mess this up somehow kind of mood. I'm hesitant, but also it's been a few years at this point, and I'm very much in love with this woman. I keep wanting to be slow, but she keeps wanting everything turned up. Okay, fine, as long as she's happy, that's what matters. I had offered to take it slow for her benefit, but she's urging me to really just go to town. She didn't want to go to the carnival at the county fair. She wanted the whole 3-ring circus with trapeze artists and elephants and lion tamers and clowns, and a ringleader with a handlebar mustache and a red tailcoat. For a less metaphorical explanation, if she wanted me to go further than I did, I'd be digging in the back of the closet to see if we still had ropes. It was okay, I guess. Afterwards, we're doing the nice, pleasant talking and cuddling thing, and I'm telling her what I like about her body and why I find her beautiful. She gets super awkward and sort of slides out of bed, grabs her clothes and escapes to the bathroom while shuffling backwards and covering herself. I'm left there incredibly confused and a little insulted. She comes back a minute later, dressed in pajamas, slides into bed awkwardly, and clicks the lights off. I'm still confused and tried to ask what happened, but she didn't want to talk about it. It never really came up after that. We talk about the idea of trying again, but the conversation would always end up dead in the water awkwardly. I loved the hell out of her, but legit. Literal years and years of no physical intimacy, punctuated by a single mediocre lovemaking session in an otherwise perfect relationship, is profoundly depressing. Story 36. My ex-wife asked me if I would try to dress in clothes a little more revealing, and she showed me what she wanted. It was basically men's trunks, like the ones that come up about an inch below tighter muscle shirts. Think Archer trying to seduce a man. She seemed adamant that would be something she'd like, so screw it, I went along with it. We even spent 20 minutes shopping together online. A few weeks later, I'm wearing what she wants around the house. We start getting into the groove in the bedroom. My shirt comes off. My trunks come off. And she starts laughing that I look funny. It turns out she didn't want me to dress like that. She thought it would humiliate me. I wasn't humiliated because it's clothes and it's what you wanted. But her attitude is why she's now my ex-wife. Story 37. My fiancé wanted to go back to school because his manual labor job was too much for him to handle. I wanted to support him in his endeavors. So we came to an agreement that he would help around the yard and clean, cook, manage the house things, like go in line to pay bills, etc. While I worked and supplied the funds for our bills, as well as his child support. After 2 weeks, school was too hard, so we resorted to smoking and playing video games by himself. I also game, so it was hurtful he didn't even want to include me. Things deteriorated quickly as I had to take on all the household duties while working 50-plus hours a week to watch my partner completely withdraw. I raised the issue multiple times, looked for alternatives, offered to pay for therapy, offered to pay for him to try school again, but ultimately it didn't work out. I couldn't get back to how things were. I felt completely overwhelmed and disrespected, so we ended the relationship. It was really sad. It's been almost 2 years, but I still think if we never made that change, we would still be together. Story 38. My ex convinced me to move to a remote mountain town with him for his dream job, which turned out to be a nightmare that he quit within 7 months. After I just graduated with a BA and was looking to start grad school immediately following, I decided I should compromise, i.e. completely sacrifice, for him and went, thinking I could put off grad school for the time being. Spent 2 years there. Got really depressed being so far from family, working a job that paid crappy wages, and had nothing to do with my degree because tourism was the only industry there. And then, of course, he decides to leave me several months before our wedding because I became depressed and turned into a different person than the one he fell in love with. I still have the wedding dress that a dear family friend helped me buy before she passed away. Needless to say, I moved back, went back to school for something different, but still adjacent to what I studied. Met and fell in love with someone far more understanding and kind, and got a job that I love in my field. The healing process wasn't as easy or linear as it made it sound, and it took a long time to feel okay again. But I feel so lucky to be where I am now. 6 years ago, I was not in a good place. Story 39. He was weirdly obsessed with this girl he called his cousin. They were just longtime family friends. She was pregnant and would call him 24/7, and he would drop me and go to her for everything she needed. I told him he was acting like it was his kid and didn't need to be supporting her financially and emotionally like he was. He continued for months. I got tired of it and told him I needed a break. Months later, I met my now husband casually dating. Max and I are still on good terms. He made a grand gesture to propose and promised me the world. I broke it off with my now husband and said yes. 3 days went by and I felt like I'd lost the love of my life. I apologized and broke it off, and it's been 22 years since I've been with my husband, married for 20 years. 3 kids and a dog. Don't propose to someone as a last-ditch effort to save a splitting relationship. In the end, I think he knew it wasn't really going to work out. I did speak to him years later, and he said he saw me sleeping away and it was all he could think of. He's married with kids now. I'm happy for him, but I wasn't his person and he wasn't mine at the end of it. Story 40. My girlfriend and I had been having some issues at the time. Just felt like something she was not happy with, but wouldn't want to talk about it, so I waited for her to open up. We were going to have lunch one weekend and she had to cancel saying she caught a cold. I was a little dejected, but I figured since she can't go out, I'll bring her some food. Went and got her favorite Chinese food and an order of soup. I finished my order, looked over into the dining area and saw her. She's not alone and sitting there with one of the guys from her work that I know for a fact is a thing for her. I walked over and just smiled. Thought you were sick. Yeah, we were pretty much over at that point and I wasn't really all that torn up about it. Story 41. Talking about her past is off limits to her, ex, because she's changed and a totally different person now in her words. We had already hooked up one time and somewhere along the way after she said, I think this entire conversation says we'd make better friends than lovers. I'd already invited her to my birthday party, to which she later declined to go because she wanted overtime money instead. Now I know some people need to survive, but she could have just said she had to work. I took the hint. I didn't even get a happy birthday from her. I don't think we'd make good friends because I'll always have that feeling of estrangement and longing, and I'm not used to our intermittent conversations where we don't talk for days at a time. I can't stand it, so I'm just dropping out. I don't think I'm ghosting her because it's not like I'm not replying to her messages. I responded to her last almost 2 weeks ago. I'm just no longer pursuing her anymore or going out of my way to message her nothings here and there. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.